Well, hey guys, welcome to the first Meet the Parent podcast here with Julie Walters. And my name is Mark, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet. And we are super excited to just have you guys here with us as we start this journey of being parents, start this journey of, for some of us, it may be starting the journey of being a parent. I don't think anybody on the stage is expecting a child. So that being the case, again, just welcome. And then, listen, this is in fact the first episode, Julie, and I'm excited to just, have this conversation because in a world where everything is evolving, I mean, we've seen so much evolve from tech to, COVID-19 kind of sped up things around here, even at Crosspoint in terms of the way that we do service and host worship experiences. And I mean, I feel like we talk about all types of things that evolve. I mean, most people don't even drive into the grocery store. I mean, pull up and go and shop for groceries. They pull up, open the trunk, and these things, they happen. And so, I mean, evolution has happened all around us. And I think that one area that we don't talk about is how parents evolve. I mean, and that's really the reason why we started this podcast, because we want to help you be in a position to evolve as a parent. We don't have all the answers, but we do have some experiences that we want to be able to share with you all. So, Julie, to get us started, I just want to hear, first of all, I admire all that you do. I mean, you direct our kids' environments here at Crosspoint, so you have a lot of influence. You have a lot of things that you've poured into students. I mean, even in your workplace, you just help students and kids and families, and you have a wealth of knowledge, and you've got a couple children yourself. And so I'm interested, as well as all those that are tuning in, tell us a little bit about your evolution, your journey as a parent, even the things maybe from your childhood and your upbringing and even where you grew up. How did those things impact you as we get to know you, and what's your journey? Tell us about it. Walk us through.
Well, I do have to say, Mark, before I get started with that, I don't know if you remember this or not, but when you were expecting Noah, I had said to you, you guys were like, what advice do you guys have? And we're like, well, listen here. I'm like, anybody who's got a lot of advice for you, be careful.
This is true.
Do you remember this?
I do remember this. We came when we were pregnant, and that's exactly what you said.
That's right. And so I was like, because we're learning. We're on this journey, right? So I was fortunate to be grow up in a family with a mom and a dad. We grew up in Ohio, and there were 4 of us.
Cool.
The cool thing about that story, though, is I should back up just a tiny bit. My parents were actually told they would never be able to have children.
Wow.
And so they were signing papers to adopt. And my mom found out she was pregnant with twins.
Oh, wow.
And then, voila, 4 of us in 4.5 years. So, yes, I was the youngest of the 4.
Wow.
How about that? And then the cool thing about that is that my parents felt like they still very much wanted to support kids that didn't have the family of supports that they, that they would be able to provide. So they became foster parents. So when I was in 1st grade, they started the process of fostering children. And so lucky me, and I mean that sincerely, while was the youngest of the 4 original, I'll call us, I got to experience life serving and caring for children younger than me. And I even have a brother who's in his 40s now that is younger than I am, but started off as a foster child in our family. So very special experience for me.
Yeah.
I always wanted to have 4 children of my own. Wasn't sure if that would ever be possible, but wanted that as well because I loved the way that we grew up. And we were blessed with 4 kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
that is a blessing. Woo, 4.
I have to mention, my husband came from a family of 4 also.
Really?
Yes. So both of us from families of 4, but I will tell you, I thought I was going to have all 4 boys.
Oh, wow.
Because I have short hair for a reason. Not really into knowing how to curl hair, braid hair,
That's
all the
hilarious.
things, right?
That's hilarious.
3 girls and 1 boy later, here we are, right?
A lot of hair products around the house, right?
Yes, and you know what? I have learned, though, it's okay that I don't know how to do all of this hair stuff because the girls, I've empowered them to learn for themselves.
Wow, they figured it out. Parent tip number 1.
That's right.
Don't
there you
do
go.
it. Just let them figure it out. Let them figure it out.
Lots of people have tried to help me,
Well,
but
yeah.
here we are. So we have a freshman in college,
Wow.
a junior, an 8th grader, and a 5th grader.
Man,
So
sounds busy.
busy at the Walters house, but you know what? It's fun, and I don't know any different because that's how I grew up.
That's true.
You know, so it would be odd if we didn't have a lot going on in our house.
Yeah.
So yeah. How about you,
cool.
Mark?
Well, a little different. I'm an only child, right? So we go from 4 to 1, right? I grew up in Baltimore City, Baltimore, Maryland, and I was the only child. My parents both come from big families. My dad, he has 3 siblings. My mom is one of 6.
Oh wow.
And they were raised in a household of actually 9, because her cousins, their mom was murdered when they were younger and had to. My mom's parents, they took them in, and so all of them grew up in the same house.
Wow.
And so so I grew up in East Baltimore. My parents were together for the first 10 years of my life. And then they separated in divorce. And so I grew up with maybe the formative years having a 2-parent household, which was really cool. And then my parents, they got divorced, and it was a struggle. I mean, it was different for me. It was one of those things where it would have been one thing if my parents got divorced and they still lived in the same city. But they were divorced, and my dad moved to California, and I was in Maryland. So we're literally 3,000 miles away, and things were just different. Financially, things were different. Emotionally, things were different. We ended up, the house that I grew up loving, had a lot of first moments in. We ended up having to give up to foreclosure.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, we had a lot of different things that was happening, a lot of transitions. And I think I learned early on, I mean, I had tons of cousins, though. My mom, she has 23 nieces.
Wow.
It's a mob of folks. And it sounds cool until you're trying to plan a wedding and figure out how many plates you got to pay for. And so it was good growing up, though. So I feel like I had siblings that they just didn't live with me. But my house also became a place where we took people in. There were guys from my football team. I'll never forget. His parents his mom was in a worse situation than us, and we took him in, and he lived with us for almost a year. I had another friend, even when I got to college, he had some issues, and he ended up living with us, and my parents helped him with scholarship money and things like that. My mom did. And so, I kind of grew up in a space that was single parent. It was tough, but I learned tough love, and my mom had to be mom and dad a lot of times, and we just worked through it. I mean, and then that's just inside the house. When you step outside the house in a city like Baltimore, it has one of the highest crime rates. There's all types of things to get into. So you have so many different things trying to pull you away from what you should be focused on. So it just made kind of coming up differently. And now I have one kid. She's an only child, married, and she just turned 1 this past Sunday.
Oh,
and so so I'm still kind of in a phase I can't even believe it's been 1 year.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to tell her first birthday was in a pandemic, which is
The beauty of it, though, is she won't fully remember it, but you get to tell the great story, right?
Exactly. It's a great story, right? She'll be like, well, why wasn't anyone at my birthday party? So we can explain to you, and we'll show you some footage of it, right?
Absolutely.
And so we have one. We're figuring it out. She had her, appointment today. She was getting shots and got to daycare and the first sickness and snotty nose. And I'm freaking out like, oh my gosh. And then all of us start to feel sick. Me and we were like, what is going on? And so, but it's been fun. And we're learning that all of this, it's a learning experience.
Absolutely.
It's a learning experience, and it's one of those experiences that there is no manual for it. Like, really, right?
Not fully, right?
Yes.
There are steps that you could take, but each child is unique. Like, that's what's great about it, but it's also like it's hard.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
how do you manage that? How do you manage those like personalities? Like, what's that like? Like, we've got one, and she's bursting with personality. So I don't know. How do you do that? Like, what is that? I mean, obviously you have like a wealth of knowledge because you and Kirk come from backgrounds of 4. So, But,
we do,
what's that
but
like?
when you're living it as a child, you're just living it as a child.
You're in the
right?
moment, right?
Like you're
You're
in
not
the
managing
moment.
anything,
You're
right?
like loving life. At least in my situation, I think it's really interesting that you ask that question, because something that really stands out to me that I have seen with all 4 of my kids is, when you're living it when they're younger, you're exhausted physically. And then I think like as they grow up, it's almost like you're exhausted like mentally, because you're like helping coach them through like tough times.
Yeah.
But I would say what's been super cool for me is for us to really be present and notice like those gifts that each of our kids have. Like we have one of our kids from the get-go, she would only go to certain people, and so like at first glance, that action feels overwhelming as a parent, right? Like you're like, oh my goodness, like why? And like people are like my own parents were like, why won't she come to us? And we were like, I don't know, like I don't know. But here's what was really cool about that. So while the action as a baby was that, right? Like you're seeing her only want to go to certain people. What we have seen as she's grown up, though, is like part of her giftedness is like I call her such a heart kid. Like she feels very deeply. She notices things about people. She notices like the beauty in people. She notices like expressions that people make, and she can read situations like an adult, honestly.
Yeah.
But you can see that thread throughout. Now, that doesn't mean that, like, the people she wouldn't go to as a child, like, she didn't like them. But what I'm saying...
Hopefully.
You could take that way. That is not what I'm...
I mean, that used to be the case, though. I used to like, if they don't go to that person, they get bad vibes, right?
Yeah, no. I don't
Okay,
think that's
all
what
right.
I don't think that's what it is.
Maybe it's a cultural thing.
I don't
could
know.
be.
Well, no, people have said this. People
Okay,
have said
all
this
right.
too. But I think it's been really interesting to really like step back. So like even in those exhausting times, no matter where you're at with kids, like to step back and reflect, like like what are like those core things about them? So even if a child gets upset about something, like what's at the root of that? Or like, man, they're like really passionate. We've got one that's like super passionate, and they have been since a baby. And so I think it's like noticing those things and then looking at like, gosh, how do I celebrate those strengths?
Right.
Not shove them down, because each person's different, and like each person, like you want their greatness to shine, like even as adults, like I'm here to like grow these kids, right? To be people to shine a light in this world.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, I've got to be able to step back, and it's not about me, but it's about really noticing like their greatness.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do sometimes, so I sometimes recommend you do that like at the end of the day if it's too crazy, right? The nurtured heart approach, like Kurt and I really have gotten into that in the last couple years. It really talks about like sometimes you need to take a reset. Sometimes your kids need to take a reset.
Yeah.
Because in the height of emotion, it's hard. And so, but there's always the thread of greatness in those passionate moments, whether
Yeah.
it be like angry or excited. So
Well, I mean, that's good. I also think that you said something that made me think about this idea of grace, right? Like sometimes we don't give, ourselves the grace that we need to figure some of those things out, right? Because it would have been easy for you to notice something and not see the thread of greatness, but what I'm learning as a very, very new parent is that I need to give my parents some grace because they didn't know. Because now I'm noticing how difficult it can be, right? How challenging it is. And yet, me being aware of that, me being aware of my fragility and my lack of knowledge, and I'm saying mine, but it's ours, right? I mean, parenting, it's a team effort, right? I mean,
Yes.
thank the Lord I have a teammate that wants to work with me around this, right? But the grace factor, I find sometimes we struggle with that. Like to even, I mean, I have a little one around, but it's like I struggle when she was sick because I want to love her, but I don't want to be sick. And I'm like carrying her, and I'm like, she's coughing, and I'm like, I want to, and I'm like pushing her around. I'm like, I hold her the opposite way so her face
right.
is turned.
I love you, right?
I love it so bad. But then I'm like, but see, you gotta. It's like it's a grace factor, and I thought about what if God did that to us, right? Like when we're just not in the best position, not in the best condition, right? If He was just like, I love you from a distance,
Right,
He
but it's
doesn't
not
do
that
that.
way, right?
He doesn't do that, and it brings this grace factor. And when I heard you say greatness, it made me think about the grace for greatness to become. Because you don't always see it initially, but if you're always looking for it, you'll provide the grace needed for it to show, for it to come out, for it to develop, and for it to grow. So and with that, what are some things that you feel like you've needed grace with as a parent, as things happen, as the children were developing, what are some areas where you feel like you needed some grace or you had to give grace? Maybe not to the kid. Maybe it was to your husband. Maybe it was to Kurt. I don't know, right? I know I've needed it not too long ago, and I'll share that in a little bit. But what are some areas that she needed some grace?
Well, I do think you bring up a really great point. I actually sometimes feel like maybe I'm learning, like I have 4 kids because I got a lot to learn. A lot to learn,
right.
As a parent, not because of them.
No,
I just mean, because I feel like I'm learning more about my parents, and I actually have more respect for them as my kids grow up, and realizing, whoa, I was pretty hard on them. Even before I had kids, when, have you ever said, well, when I have kids, I can assure you I'm not going to do this. And then you're like, and so I do think, there's that. I think also grace in you don't have to know it all. So, this whole nature versus nurture thing, I got to tell you, I would love to hope that maybe somebody else was in the same boat. With our first child, we went to all the baby classes, okay?
You did too?
Yes, we did. However, I didn't feel like I needed to take any notes.
Oh.
Because people have been doing this for forever, right?
Right,
it's not rocket science. So my husband, Kurt, he's got his notes, he's taking notes, and I'm sitting there like, this is really, come on. This is not that hard, right?
Right.
Well, then we had the baby. I was like, I just kept saying I should have listened to the classes. The first bath took over an hour.
Oh, my word.
My mom stopped videotaping after about 5 minutes.
Oh, my God.
Because I was like, I'm not sure what I do next. She's like, it's not that hard.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's being able to laugh at yourself and giving yourself grace of you don't have to have it all together.
Yeah.
But do something, right? I think it's this idea of this growth mindset of man, I don't know it all, so I'm gonna seek out some resources. I'm gonna, like work alongside my husband or my wife, and if I don't have that, I'm gonna find my tribe, right? That we're
Yeah.
gonna like learn together, and we're gonna process those things together. Because I think it's like an ongoing learning. You know, every phase, I'm learning so much.
Something to
You
learn.
know, but
Yeah.
then this grace of like, I'm not supposed to have it all together. I don't think that's ever been the case. There's no human that is perfect. God doesn't even expect that out of us, right?
Right.
And so, but being willing to accept that,
Yeah.
and being willing to accept like help, whether that be processing it with your spouse, whether that be processing it with someone else, whether it be like looking for resources, and then being reflective. I think that's a key piece too.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's about, okay, I've done that and I'm gone, let's move on, but it's man, like, how did that go? Like, where did that go wrong, or where did that go right?
Right.
You know?
Right,
Like,
right.
Not always, we always want to go to where did it go wrong.
Exactly.
But really, you probably should start with, like, where did that go right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's grace, but I think it's also grace for my kids too, right? That sometimes we want them to be like perfect, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm not perfect.
You're not? What?
I know.
Newsflash. Julie
Hard
is
to believe. Let's not put our kids on here. The pandemic has changed me just a little bit.
Oh, wow.
Right? There's things that I'm like, you probably shouldn't repeat that to anybody.
Right. You never heard that.
But how about for you?
Yeah. I think that's what it's been in terms of, like, I've needed that grace for, not trying to be, for me, it's more of like not wanting to be what I saw.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, what I saw, the negative aspects of my childhood, what I saw in terms of a household, and it wasn't all bad. I mean, I had tons of fun as a kid, just growing up. Like, I had a really good childhood. I mean, we traveled. But then there were some dark days, and there were dark times, and there were spaces whereby I didn't necessarily, I didn't like coming home. I barely could sleep. And my parents were like more oil and water. They just didn't mix. And that's okay, right? But they had to figure out how to co-parent. And then when that time came, it wasn't there. But so for me, it was all about presence, and not attempting to judge what's happening as much as just experience what's happening. And sometimes I get caught like not doing because I'm just experiencing it, right? Like, I'm not trying to figure it out all the time. But I did pay attention. I went to those classes. I went to Daddy Boot Camp.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was great.
You paid attention. You took notes.
I was the diaper changing master. Like, when I came out of there, I was like, and Whitney was like, what? Oh, you know how to do this. Like, oh, you can swaddle? I'm on Swaddle Champ of the Year. Yes, I can do that. And any dads watching, you should do Dad Boot Camp. Daddy Boot Camp is phenomenal. It's a good head start for first-time dads. Maybe second-time dads, too. Maybe you missed something.
And take notes. Do not be embarrassed to take notes. Even if you're a mom, take notes.
Yeah, like, it's okay. And experience it. Be present.
Yes.
In terms of evolving, like, I had to stop, like, being just present and get off the sideline and get in the game and really try to, be there and just assist. Because now, you were wishing that you didn't have, or maybe you wanted all boys and, you got all girls. And I'm thinking, man, if I could just have a son, I'd be good to go. But I get a daughter and I'm like, huh. But it's kind of cool because I don't have to worry about dressing her as much because let her mom do that. Like, that's your department. Shoes, hair.
There you go.
Look, she lays it out for me, and I just make sure it gets on.
You have to put it on her.
It's good stuff.
I love it.
It's good stuff. I appreciate it. So, but yeah, in terms of grace, and even in terms of like looking for that support, I gotta say that I've heard you mention Nurtured Heart. So talk a little bit about Nurtured Heart, because like with that, I feel like that's a phenomenal resource that I think everybody that's watching should look into. So.
Well, we came across it, gosh, I think it was like 2 years ago. And really for me, it really feels like the way that I feel like God cares for us.
Yeah.
So it really aligns with that. Now, I don't know the creator of it necessarily, if he really is a believer or not, and that doesn't really matter, in the sense of like, it's just really powerful. And so really they go by like three stands. The first one is like absolute no, so no to negativity, but an absolute yes to positive energy. And so noticing and naming specifically those characteristics that are nurturing, that are those, I use that word greatness a lot because that comes from the Nurtured Heart approach, but those characteristics that are not like actions, but like that are true to who that person is.
Yeah.
And then absolute clarity. So like real distinct expectations and rules for your child, for your family. You know, it was based off of supporting children who are difficult to manage, I'll say. But the irony of it is that I feel like it's helpful for anyone. And
Yeah.
actually, even my interactions with adults is really like
Really?
noticing and naming, right? Like the greatness that you see in someone. You
Wow.
know, that's been one of my biggest key things, because our natural tendency is to just go to the negative or to go to the action, right?
Yeah.
Like that someone broke something or someone said something, but like to look for like, where's that greatness or that goodness in that person? Like, man, that person's really passionate though.
Yeah.
You know, or person really has some self-discipline. They don't want to give up on doing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's been powerful in shifting our mindset and really focusing in on those positive, nurturing statements. So I'd suggest people check that out. Even like social media, the group pages that they have for that can be super helpful. And I would also say, like my husband and I were just talking about this, Kurt and I were just talking that Tim Elmore, his work is a lot with like adolescence,
Yeah.
and yet it applies.
Familiar.
Like, have you checked out his stuff?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
have you? Yeah. But don't you think it applies to
Yeah.
no
Oh,
matter
yeah.
what age? And we were like, man, we wish we had that when our kids were younger
Yeah.
as well. And those have just been great resources for us, just to like continue to build ourselves as parents, because it's not like it's a fixed. You don't have to be fixed in your parenting.
Right.
It's about that ongoing, growing
It's a journey.
journey. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a journey. And, you know, for all of that information, whether it's Nurtured Heart or Tim Elmore, we'll have some links below in the comment section that you could go ahead and click on and look for some of that stuff. Because here's the thing. I mean, we are on a journey. And that's
right.
what Meet the Parents is about. We're journeying together. And this is a place where we can all grow, we can all learn. And we're excited to go on this journey with you as you continue to be the best parents that you could be. So, hey, thank you guys for tuning in. Julie, you got any final words for us? Or
It's been great to
Yeah.
spend time with you, and
Yeah.
I look forward to us continuing to learn and grow with those that are watching.
why not?
Right?
Why not? Why not?
That's right.
That's cool. So look, stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, as well as hit the notification button so that you get all of the notifications for the newest episode coming to you very soon. You guys have a good one.